Well, hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Project Management for the Masses podcast. Okay, so today I decided to take a few minutes here at the beginning to ramble on a little bit about everything that's going on and share some of the things that have been in my heart and in my mind. So if you're not interested in this, feel free to skip ahead to the content, which will come in later. So these are weird, different times. And I just wanted to take a few minutes just to let you all know that I appreciate everybody. I appreciate each one of you who have been listening. Maybe this is your first time listening. You know, what the world is experiencing now, which is this unity around this common threat. I have been honored and privileged to have experienced already since 2013 when we started this podcast. I've been able to connect with a lot of you and have meaningful, deep conversations about life and work and careers and family and all those things. And to me, as bad as the situation is right now with the world and the threat of this invisible enemy, as they say, it is encouraging to see people connecting and caring for each other, regardless of politics and race and nationality. This threat is truly the equal opportunity attacker. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, what you do for a living. We all need to be doing the same things right now, which, depending on where you are in the world, is different. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do because depending on where you are in the world, the precautions and the things you need to do will differ, right? So right now here in Canada, where I live, we've been encouraged to stay home. You know, commerce has, for the most part, closed. It's just, you can still go to the hardware store and places like that, but a lot of restaurants and bowling alleys, places like that are all closed, gyms, and we can still walk outside and go jogging and walk the dog, things like that. I understand that's not the case everywhere. So if you are, in a difficult situation, either because you are home alone or because maybe you're sick or maybe somebody close to you is sick right now, I wanted you to know that I appreciate you and I am reaching out to you. You need to talk about anything, connect with me. Just go to pmforthemasses.com. There's a contact form there. Send me a message. Or you can do so on Twitter as well. And it's Cesar Abeid. And I recommend us to connect that way. Tell us what's on your mind, on your heart. And know that PM for the Masses is a bit of a community. There is over 4,000 people in the mailing list. There is even more than that who are subscribers to the podcast. So we are a community. We are on this together. We have similar backgrounds, similar goals, similar life experiences because of project management. So maybe there is a way for us to help each other somehow. If nothing else, to be there for each other and listen and be heard and things like that. So one thing is I wanted to let you know is that I'm thinking about you and thinking about how I can help. I feel like I'm in a privileged position because it's very interesting. I've been working from home for almost 4.5 years now. And my wife is a stay-at-home mom and we homeschool. So we are unusually prepared for what the world is asking of everybody right now, which is to stay home with your family, if you have a family, or with your kids, if you have kids. So though it is disruptive for us, we have to cancel activities for the children and, visits and play dates and things like that in church, but we can't complain. We're well suited for this. So that's one part of the reason why I feel like I'm a bit privileged. The other part is I am a bit of the head of a community and the world needs community right now. So I've been thinking about ways that I can help out. And one of the ways is to perhaps create more content. So I know it's been spotty lately because of my work and different things I've been working on, but I'd like to commit to create more episodes. So if you're stuck at home and you enjoy the show, maybe there's 1 hour every week or so that you can sit down and put on your headphones and listen to some interesting, something that's not related to coronavirus for a change. That's one thing. The other thing is I was on Twitter a couple days ago, and somebody I follow on Twitter say, hey, if anybody's available, I'm going to be on Zoom right now for the next hour. So just hop in. And I did. I hopped in. It was just me and this guy. He's the leadership freak, his name is Dan Rockwell. And I ended up having a nice little chat with him and inviting him to come and be on the podcast. So maybe he'll be a future guest here. And I thought, okay, well, this is something I can do. So if you are not following me on Twitter, just go on Twitter, look me up there. I'll put a link on the show notes for today's episode. And maybe I'll do that from time to time. If I have a lunch hour or I'm going to take a break, I'll just put the link to a Zoom meeting and see who shows up. And then we can chat for a little bit. So that's one thing. The other thing is I may be doing episodes on working from home or managing teams that are remote, because I do have some experience with that. And a lot of it is stuff I take for granted, and because I've been doing this for a while, but I understand there's a lot of folks who are now project managers or team leads who all of a sudden need to manage their team from remote. So if you do have any questions, just go and ask, and you can put it in the comment box for pmforthemasses.com, and I'll try to answer there or get ideas so I can do an outline for an episode on that. So these are the things I've been thinking about, creating more content, building on our community a bit more, being present for everybody, and encouraging you all to be present for each other, and share some tips and have discussions on working remotely. So that's what's on my mind. So the interview that I'm sharing with you today is very timely. It is about managing distributed teams with Johanna Rothman and Mark Kilby. And without any further ado, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of each other, and here we go.
Project managers, have you ever felt like you should get that promotion or a better job? Start a business, write that book. Have you ever felt you were made for more but didn't know where to start?
Welcome to the PM for the Masses podcast with your host, Cesar Abeid.
Learn from the experts, think outside the box, have a voice, network, and be extraordinary.
PM for the Masses podcast.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome once again. I'm Cesar Abeid, your host, and this show is your regular reminder that your career matters more than your job, and that your life is a project, and that you are the manager. Whether you work for a company or just for yourself, your job stability is really just your ability to land your next gig. So, join me in practicing intentional, planned, and value-adding relevance, starting right now. And today is episode 124 of the show, and I have two people here, two book authors, Johanna Rothman and Mark Kilby. They have recently published the excellent book called From Chaos to Successful Distributed Agile Teams, which you can find more information on by going to today's podcast notes at pmforthemasses.com/124. And today we're going to talk about Agile in distributed teams. So Johanna and Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar.
Good to have you here. So usually I have just one guest, so hopefully we're not going to be talking on top of each other, but this is a good exercise for distributed teams, actually, because a lot of these distributed teams, they talk over Zoom, which is what we're using right now to record this. So let's see if we can make this work. It'll be like a proof of concept.
Absolutely.
And we're somewhat practiced in doing this.
Right.
Yeah, we do.
All right. So I actually read this book a while back when we were just finishing writing it, Johanna, and you sent me a copy. And then I also got the audiobook and I listened to it again. And it's a great book. So for those listening right now, if you are in a situation where you're either considering having part of your team or the entire team distributed, or if you're inheriting a team that is distributed and you have experience having teams that are co-located, this is a great reference. I was just telling Johanna before we started here that her books tend to read like a manual, like a textbook almost. So if you are in that situation, I cannot recommend this book enough. There's a lot of references and approaches that you can basically come out of it with a plan.
But
Go ahead.
let me just say one thing.
Yes.
Not a boring book.
I did not say
So
that.
it might be a textbook, but not boring. Okay.
I did not say that.
We have many stories to keep it interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
There is many stories. Yes, there are many stories. It is not boring. Wait, I just said that I read it twice. So
Yeah. Just in case.
okay, so I'm going to start with this question because I kind of get this vibe. Okay, when I read this very interesting and not boring book twice, that y'all don't seem to think that distributed teams is the ideal way to deliver on projects. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, actually, what I find is that when teams realize that they can think of the principles in the book, they will actually create a better co-located team. And if they think about creating a workspace as if they were distributed, now they have a much more resilient team altogether. Do I think that remote is the best possible way? I have serious doubts about that. However, most of my clients have mostly distributed teams. So I really wanted to do something that would help them succeed as opposed to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to answer that one slightly differently.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give the classic consultant answer of it depends, but I'm going to explain it. I would agree with Johanna that in many cases, it's remote allows people to replicate some of the collaboration that you have in co-located teams. It's not the same, but as we have released the book and I'm talking to more people, it is a preference for many. It is also an advantage for several people that have difficulty working in traditional office spaces. For instance, I've actually come across a few people that are dealing with disabilities that are saying that working in a remote setting is actually advantageous for them because they now appear to have a more equal place in the team or the organization because you're not necessarily observing the disability every day.
So let me take a minute to talk about my favorite remote collaborating tool. It's called MindMeister, and it's a mind mapping application. MindMeister is a completely web-based mind mapping software that runs in any standard web browser. So the mind maps you create are saved automatically in the cloud online and can be accessed from anywhere. If you don't know what a mind map is, think of it as a free-flowing visual outline tool that can be used for anything you want. So I've been using MindMeister for 10 years now. It is by far my favorite tool for organizing my thoughts, for sharing my thoughts with my team, and also for collaborating with other people. So, for example, it is a perfect tool for you to create a WBS, a work breakdown structure. It's beautifully laid out, it's all online, and it's a wonderful company. So aside from the web app, MindMeister also offers native mobile apps for iPhone, iPad, even Apple Watch and Android devices, which means that you can access, edit, and present your maps no matter where you are. MindMeister was made as intuitive and as fast as possible to ensure that you can fully concentrate on the creative task at hand. So there's no clutter, no friction, just your team and your ideas. And speaking of teams, unlike traditional mind mapping tools, MindMeister lets you brainstorm in real time with an unlimited number of users. So I do this all the time. I'll brainstorm something by myself using a mind map, and then I share that with my coworkers who are far away, and they hop in and they help me out with brainstorming and moving things around. It's really cool. And MindMeister has a special code that will give you a 10% discount for my audience. If you go to pmforthemasses.com/mindmap, pmforthemasses.com/mindmap, if you sign up for any of the paid accounts, you can put in the code MASSES, as in PM for the Masses, so MASSES, and you'll get 10% off. And you don't even need to upgrade to a paid plan because MindMeister offers a free plan that it's a bit limited, but you can try it out. And then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can use that code. That's a great way for you to get started. And if you do upgrade, it's a great way to support this podcast. And also, you will let them know, the folks at MindMeister, that you heard about MindMeister here on the PM for the Masses podcast. So again, pmforthemasses.com/mindmap and enter the code MASSES for 10% off. Now back to the show. Interesting. So it creates perhaps a more inclusive environment, and geographically inclusive too. So you can have folks who you don't have to live in, in the Silicon Valley, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, you might not know, but I work for a company that's 100% distributed, and it's by design, right? And so in those cases, do you believe that if you are trying to create a product, right, place it in the market and iterate and do all those wonderful things that Agile tells us to do, are companies like this in a disadvantage against if they're competing with another company that may have like an entire team that is in the same building? Are they going to be able to deliver faster?
So deliver faster does not always mean deliver better.
Correct.
So I like to measure, what's the outcome? And you've probably heard this from Johanna as well. So as an example, one of the clients I work with, fully distributed, market leader, and so successful that they were recently purchased by another organization because of their success in the marketplace. And they happen to be 100% distributed. Mm-hmm. So I will say, yes, there are companies that can be highly competitive that way. Is remote part of that competitive nature? Yes, I believe to a degree, but there's always more to it than that. It's how the management works together and how teams collaborate. So there's other elements of it. I will not say that it's strictly because they were remote, but they are able to tap into talent worldwide because of their remote nature.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can also offer an example, Mark and I collaborated on this book as a fully distributed Agile team, right? We paired through the entire book. There is not one word that is one of us and not the others of us. Okay, so that might not have been English, but it was close. And and I think it's really important to say this book is better because we paired. And I also have several clients that are fully distributed by design, and they have found through I guess what's the word I want, Mark? Trial and error. Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, I always ask him because he often knows what I'm thinking. but through trial and error, that the closer they are in terms of hours of overlap, or they were using time zones as a way to discuss hours of overlap, the more successful those teams were. And I know so many teams who think that they're co-located because they're all in one zip code, and they're not. They're on this huge campus. One person is in building 1, one person is in building 3, one person is in building 5, et cetera, and they never get together. They have the worst of all possible worlds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's take then a step back here, because I'm assuming that people listening right now, they actually read the book, but they probably haven't yet. What are some of the drawbacks and challenges that distributed teams face, especially in when we're talking about Agile.
Do you want to take that, Mark?
I'll take that one. I wasn't sure if you're going to jump in first.
Well, I tend to jump, so yeah.
That's why I was waiting. So
thank you.
So that's one of the disadvantages right there is if you don't have the right working agreements in place ahead of time. But one of the tendencies, and we talk about this throughout the book, is this tendency to try to adopt Agile practices as they are in a co-located setting and apply them distributed. Almost never works well. This is where you have people up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, probably not terribly productive, or shifting their hours. We have a few stories around that, but also not looking to experiment and try something different, but really trying to rigidly hold on to their practices, even if they claim that they are an Agile team or an Agile organization. That's where the distributed teams get into some difficulty. So having that ability to experiment and having choice in how they operate, it becomes a key factor for the successful distributed Agile team. So I kind of flipped your question around a little bit there, but I want to say that there was a bit of a bright side to that, is where they do have choice, they can be successful.
Okay.
Johanna?
Yeah. So one of my back when several years ago, and I think that this was part of the genesis of asking Mark to work on the book with me, was I was working out at the gym, and this guy came in every day. He was training for a marathon. He was up at 3 a.m. to talk to the port testers in India. He went back to sleep. He was at the gym at 7 to 8 or something, doing whatever it was he did that day. He went into work for 9. He came back from work. He stopped working at 5 or 5:30. He had dinner, and then he was on the phone, or it was actually a phone call. It was horrible at that time, with people farther west, because his day was not done. He went to bed around 10, and he got up every single day for a 3 a.m. phone call. And I said to him, and at one point he said to me, I really hate to complain, but I'm so tired. I said to him, yeah, we really need good sleep. What's the word? Making sleep habits, I think is the word I use. He said, yeah, I don't get to do that. I'm thinking, why not? Why are you doing this? So he was representative of all kinds of distributed and then quote Agile, end of quote, teams who thought that they needed a stand up. Well, I mean, you cannot collaborate. Why would you even do that to yourself? So this is all. If you see teams just take practices wholesale and not think about how do we have a retrospective that actually works for our team, right? Never mind reconnecting on the work. If we're not thinking about that, then I think it's really important to say, why would we even do this to ourselves?
Mm-hmm. I think, as I read around, I see you guys on Twitter talking about this here and there, and articles and things like that. I think one of the issues that when people think Agile, they immediately think of some specific application like Scrum, for example, and or some other approach, right? And well, Scrum's a good example, right? So it's kind of restrictive in a way, because you have to have these meetings and these specific people need to be there, right? And they need to be had once a week, same time, same place. They assume that people are in the same room. So when we talk about an entirely distributed team, if you are in the Scrum mindset, for example, people just they don't know what to do with it. Like, how could I possibly do this? So how do we?
Well, they're actually right. They should not be using Scrum. I mean, Every time, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what podcast I'm on. It's not that I don't like Scrum. I actually like Scrum a lot. But if you just imagine you have more than 3 or 4 time zones, and people like to work sort of 9 to 5 in their time zones. When does the iteration start and when does it end? Never mind the stand-ups. Never mind the planning. How can you possibly know? So the fact that people think that Agile is Scrum is a different problem. I have written about that
Right.
several times. Yes, I won't go there. And but that means that if we cannot actually use our brains and think about the best possible ways to use an Agile approach, maybe we deserve what we get.
Well, okay. Well, it's not just Scrum. For example, I believe it's extreme programming that requires you to work in pairs, right? Also assuming that if you're not in the same location, at least you're awake at the same time, right?
Well, there's that. Yeah.
So,
and I have teams, I have distributed teams that use Scrum, but they're all in the same time zone, just not in the same
Right.
city. Okay. So extreme programming, Scrum, that concept of restricting or controlling the flow of work through a time box is almost near impossible at times with distributed teams, but there are other approaches.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that then. So what are some, let's say you do have a distributed team that you inherited. So you didn't get to choose where these people live or time zones or anything like that. And let's say they're all over the place. What are some of the things that you can do in order to be able to implement some of the things that you talk about in the book?
So one of the things that I always recommend that a lot of managers appear to dislike is actually getting people together for a week at a minimum, just to understand how can we all work together? Are there ways for us to work together better or worse? And that allows us to create working agreements. Back in God, I hate to say this, the 80s, when I managed a cross-country group of developers and support people, I got us together once a quarter, just for a few days. And yes, the first time I asked for all that money for travel, my bosses had a little conniption fit. But the value of getting together in person made it possible for us to work together very effectively, collaboratively over the rest of the time. So, especially if you are a project manager or a manager and you're in a new position for you and you're taking over this supposed team that is far flung, the best thing I think you can do is get people together and really help them learn how to work together in person and develop working agreements so they can work together when they go back to their homes.
And that's where that idea of choice comes in that I was talking about before. So if you can let go of the concept of local office hours and constraining people to be in a space for a certain period of time and allow them to set their team hours. So where does the team have overlap that they can collaborate, where they can plan together, where they can maybe even pair program together or do code review or just hash out an idea together, having them work at that's their core collaboration hours, and then have flexibility outside of that time so that maybe they have family needs or other needs, but having that flexibility to deal with those instead of trying to fit everything into their quote normal day unquote. And like the story that Johanna was saying, have these tremendously long days that just aren't healthy, let alone unproductive. So it's allowing people to have that choice and being committed to their team core collaboration hours. And that's what we refer to as setting those hours of overlap through those working agreements.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is that this is nothing new. This is one of the agile principles, right? Like let the team decide how they work best together. Just in a different at a different level, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I've been doing this for many years as well with teams, and I would often say to myself, well, if I call myself an agilist, I have to inspect and adapt with the situation. And I had to. That there were many times I didn't have that choice, but I could find ways to make it work for the team and my colleagues. So,
okay. All right. You mentioned both of you mentioned overlap, and the book talks about hours of overlap as well. What are some of the best practices here? Is there like a magic number that is, anything less than X number of hours of overlap between team members, things start to fall apart?
Yeah, we think that fewer than 4 hours of overlap for the entire team, you cannot really use an agile approach. Well, we don't see how. And I should say, we don't see how to make an effective agile approach. Because while we happen to pair the entire time in this book, we do realize that some agile teams don't pair the entire time. And they don't mob the entire time. Some people will still go off and do some of their own work. But I think it's so important for the team as a whole to have time where they can collaborate together, even if it's just asking a question and getting an answer right away.
Right. So that is the main goal of these hours of overlap is so the communication is more synchronous than asynchronous.
Yeah.
yes, but you can use the asynchronous communication as a tool as well. So earlier we were talking about retrospectives. So some of the things I've done with my teams is looked at, if we look at the some of the retrospective frameworks, like out of the Agile Retrospectives book, where it's setting the stage and gathering data. Those some of those parts can actually be done asynchronously. So as a Scrum Master or coach or facilitator, there's some things you can ask the team to do to prepare for that retrospective, to gather that data ahead of time. And when the team is synchronous, when they are together in a Zoom meeting or whatever, they can then review that data together. They can look at other data that perhaps they hadn't considered before, pull that into the retrospective, also decide what are they going to do with that data, do a little bit of their analysis, root cause, whatever they need, and then decide what to do. And sometimes some of my teams even decide what to do later. Like they might decide, hey, let's think about some of these key issues we've raised, and let's talk about which ones we're going to push forward tomorrow in our stand-up. So I've had teams that have done that. They want a little time to think about it. Maybe there's more introverts in those teams than extroverts, which is not unusual. And they wanted that time to kind of think through, all right, what are those one or two things we really want to change next? And mixing that asynchronous and synchronous can actually be an advantage for those types of teams.
Mm-hmm. And that could be part of the team agreements, right? Like Johanna mentioned, like we can think of ahead of time, like what are the things that we can do asynchronously, and what are the things that we need to save for the times that we overlap, so we are making the most out of that short period of time.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. So retrospective is a good example. I agree. It doesn't require, maybe it would be faster to do if everybody's in the room at the same time, or it's at least, awake at the same time, but it could be done asynchronously. But maybe, resolving this one bug, it is better if you have two people working on it at the same time and going back and forth as they try to kill it.
Well, I really like to think about talk to the duck debugging, because every time I have tried to explain to somebody, here's what I did. I did this thing, and then I did this thing, and then I did this thing, and I say, oh, there it is. Thank you so much. Now I am the extrovert, so it's not entirely surprising that I would get this by talking. But even introverts find that talking to the duck is very, very helpful.
Yeah, I always say it's easy. It's a lot easier to catch a chicken in the backyard synchronously than asynchronously.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Wonderful. So create agreements. Think about things that you can do asynchronously and things that you need to do synchronously. You also talked about getting together for a week. How often should people do that?
So at least once a year, but we recommend more often. I know there are some organizations that will bring either parts of the organization or everybody together like every 6 to 9 months. One of my clients, what they do is they'll bring the entire organization together once a year, because it's not just one team that's working together. It could be several teams that are collaborating throughout the year. And so having the teams together to meet each other, to understand how the individual teams work, maybe set up some working agreements between the teams, that becomes important. But when a new initiative gets kicked off, they'll bring that subgroup, the collection of teams, back together, or maybe it's a new group that they're setting up. So it's not unusual for them to have the annual meeting and then 4, 5, 6 smaller gatherings based on a new product or new feature set that's being launched that will involve one or several teams. But that idea of, we're kicking this off together, we're going to physically huddle together for this so that we get to spend time talking through what is the vision, what approaches we might want to take, what do we see based on the experience of the team, what risks they're going to face, and have everyone together and spending a few days to talk through that has been the most valuable for those distributed teams.
And my clients, the ones who are totally distributed by design, they tend to have a quarterly meetup. I don't remember what, I think that at least one of them calls it a meetup, and one of them calls it something else. I don't remember, but their cadence is a quarter. They find that longer than that, and people, it's almost like they forget that there's another person on the end of the email or the Slack or something. So it's not, people don't mean to lose the context of the human out there, but they tend to lose the context of a human out there if they don't somehow see each other on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah. Our company, we do the yearly, called the grand meetup. Everybody gets together, and then each team will do at least once a year, sometimes more than that. Will do their own team meetup. They'll tackle a project, or they'll, just at least, the very least, they just to see each other's faces and create alignment and buy-in to whatever we're doing. Right. It's very powerful in that way, like to create alignment. We can talk about this topic using our voices.
Well, and it's so much easier to. We went into the various theories of rich and natural communication in the book, and when we can really see all of the humanness of us, that's the part of the rich and natural communication that makes such a difference for our success as people on projects.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also where we talk about resilience in the book, is appreciating that humanness and understanding, for instance, maybe who has a new baby in the house and might have some unusual hours over the next few months. and how can they maybe adjust, how can they ask the team to adjust working agreements so they can still contribute, still be a part of the team, but their hours might be very different, and it's not caused by the team. It's caused by this small human that's now very demanding on their time. So,
right now, and I'm sure you've seen the stats and the articles out there saying this, the newer generation, being able to work from home or distributed is a big plus for a lot of people these days. And there are a lot of companies that are trying to catch up to that. And so there might be companies out there, might be people listening right now who actually work in the same building in same area. It's a co-located team, but they're trying to attract talent and attract new talent. And they're considering maybe hiring new people who are distributed. What are some tips or some pitfalls to avoid if you do already have teams that are established and that are co-located, but you're considering adding more people who are not?
So for me, the biggest thing is making sure that the new people, especially if you end up with a satellite or a cluster team where you have the bulk of the team on site and one or two people not on site or in a different site, that's a satellite. A cluster is a couple of people here, a couple of people there, a couple of people there. Is to make sure you don't forget all about the people who are not at the main site. I see this a lot when we have headquarters and remote. And back in the 80s, when one of my senior managers said, well, those remote people, they should blah, blah, blah. And I said, so we're remote to them, right? Who's remote now? And of course, me in my frank and assertive and direct way. So I think it's really important to say, how can we make the work experience as equitable as possible? And this means that what I like to do is actually say to everybody, let's make sure all of us could work remotely, and that sometimes we all do work remotely.
Right. So using the same principles that work for distributed teams, but use them even if you're not.
Yeah. So you again, the idea of experimenting with, can we work remotely? Can we maybe try a day a month and then go to a day every couple of weeks and then once a week and try it that way? Maybe you have team members that are not so crazy about that idea. And in those cases, that's where I've used some other approaches, like the buddy system we described in the book. So in the case of, say, a meeting where most of the people are in a conference room, but you have a few remote people, I will ask individuals in the room who knows some of the remote people the best, and you'll get hands raised. And I'll ask them to individually buddy up with those individuals. So let's say we have Bob and Sarah remote, and I'll ask some of the people in the room, hey, could you pair up with Bob? And Frank, could you pair up with Sarah? And what that means is I just want you to watch chat, or however is the easiest way for you to stay in touch with them and make sure they can connect, they can break in on the conversation, they can hear. And if we're doing anything in the room, that they've got a way to have a view. So whether that's moving your laptop around or grabbing a picture with your phone, you're their eyes and ears. You're there representing them. I find that when I do that, one, it takes the burden off of me as facilitator. I'm focusing on the facilitation and not everything around the distributed. But two, you have those people in the room that are now highly focused on the remote participants, and they start to be more empathetic with those remote participants, and that carries outside of the meeting.
Right. Yeah, I find that another advantage of the distributed culture is the tools used for communication. They tend to be more permanent, right?
Yes.
So, in where I work, if every single thing that I've done there, it's searchable, right? Done and said.
Well, okay, so you're not like me, so that's fine.
Well, it has to be like if I don't, because we use Slack and we use other tools, right? If I want to talk to my team, that's where I go, and that it creates a record. So I can go back even 4 years ago and read my job interview. It's all there. Everything is there, which is I think it's a benefit in a way, because you can always it requires less meetings, because you can have instead of gathering people in a room to recap something, you can just do a search. The data is there. And I think these are things that co-located teams can start making more use of. And not only does it include people who are remote, but also creates this documentation culture of documentation as you work, instead of, hey, I need to write that report. Less reports are needed if everything is documented.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Well, I feel like we just scratched the surface here. There's just so much to talk about, and I can't recommend this book enough. So, Johanna and Mark, if people want to learn more about you and what you do and the book, where should they go? Johanna, you go first.
Thank you. So everything I have is at Rothman, JROTHMAN.com. The book has a short URL, jrothman.com/SDAT for Successful Distributed Agile Teams. All my other books are there, so everything is there.
Perfect.
And for me, you can see my blog posts on distributed teams, my newsletter at markkilby.com. That's MARKKILBY.com. And you'll soon see also an assessment that Johanna and I have been working on, as well as some online courses on the book around how to build your successful distributed agile teams.
And that would be at markkilby.com as well.
Yes, as well as Johanna's, yeah.
As well as jrothman.com. Very good. And I'll have links to all these at pmforthemasses.com/124 for episode 124. Mark, Johanna, thank you so much for your time, for writing this wonderful book. And I hope to have you back on the show to talk about your next book soon.
Well, thank you so much, Cesar. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it. And congratulations for all those podcasts.
Thank you.
Yes, just that is a huge accomplishment. And thank you for having me on as well.
Thank you. It's a distributed team of one. Actually, it's co-located too. Think about it. Thank you so much. And again, pmforthemasses.com/124. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the PM for the Masses podcast.
Tune in next week for more great ideas on how to manage your projects better and truly stand out in your industry.
pmforthemasses.com